This is John's House, a daily place for real conversation about Frederick. From the decisions that affect your neighborhood to the events, nonprofits, restaurants, and local leaders that make this community move. Local, regional, national, and always connected to home. Come on in. John's House starts now.
Welcome to Wednesday morning. Another beautiful day in Frederick. We'll take them when we can get them. I tell you what, last week we were dealing with the real field temperatures of 108, 109, 110 degrees. Today, still sunshine and a nice breeze. Not quite as cool as the last couple of days, but we will take it as we're just a few days away. The 20th is the official summer solstice, the start of summer right around the corner. A lot of fun things happening. Teachers are off. They're done. They're cleaning their classrooms in Frederick County today, and I know they're all happy about that. So you'll see a lot more influx of kids running around the area. A lot of people going on their family vacations over the next couple of weeks as well here in Frederick. We are also in election time in Frederick. The primaries are here. So the primaries are, early voting has already started. The main primaries for the Republicans and the Democrats come your way next week. On the 23rd is the actual day if you're going to wait and go to the polls rather than do the early voting. You'll be going to your polling places. We have named them over the last couple of weeks here on John's House. So make sure you know where your polling place is. Make sure you get out and vote. And even if you're an independent candidate or independent voter, I should say, not a candidate, but a voter, you still get to vote for the things like school board and central committees and things like that. So make sure you do your civic duty, or don't complain after the fact about whomever ends up in office, especially if it ends up a close race, which a lot of these races do. Make sure you get out and do your civic duty. And then when it comes to the main election, I got to say this to everyone who tells their friends or people they meet, "Hi, I'm an independent voter. I'm an independent." If you're an independent, vote for something independent, because otherwise nothing will ever change. We will always just have two parties unless the 35% of the people who claim that they're an independent because they can't deal with the far left or the far right, whichever, nothing is ever going to change. Yes, it'll take a full election cycle to make a difference. But again, if all of those people who say they're independent actually vote that way, it will make a difference. And here's another reason to think about that. Now, I've said this before. I am a centrist, leaning right Republican. I have been. My first time I got a chance to vote, Ronald Reagan was running for office and won. And, things changed in the country. Ronald Reagan is one of the greatest presidents of all time. I'll always say that. Depending on what your particular issue is, maybe you agree, maybe you don't. But things in our country improved drastically over the previous administration, where we had an oil crisis and we had hostages in Iran and things like that going on. The day that Reagan came into office, what happened? They weren't afraid of Jimmy Carter, but the Iranians were definitely afraid of Ronald Reagan, and afraid in a respectful way. And the day he came into office, what happened? Does anybody remember? Class, Bueller. It was the release of the hostages the day Reagan came into office. And something else happened worldwide during Reagan's administration. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. Anybody remember the wall getting torn down? Again, that happened when we had a president who was presidential and good things happened. Now we're talking about Maryland races here on John's House today. And, I talked about us coming a long way, not necessarily the right direction in every aspect of voting these days. Earlier this morning on Good Morning Frederick, AJ had a news story that talked about how people are acting so childish. I mean, if you want to vote or you want to root for, or you want to support a candidate, that's fine. Put your sign in your yard or wherever it's legal to put your sign. But there's no reason whatsoever to be going out and destroying other people's signs. Here's AJ from this morning's Good Morning Frederick on the news.
1,000 views on a video that we did earlier last week about Brad Young's campaign signs being vandalized. Several campaign signs were spray painted with anti-Israel message, profanity, and other slogans Tuesday at Trinity Recreation Center, an early voting site in Frederick. Signs belonging to the Board of Education candidates Sam Rosenblum and Heather Fletcher, along with signs for County Executive Diane Fouché, County Council candidate Jack Felton, and the Orange Ballot Group were among those vandalized. Rosenblum called the message on his signs anti-Semitic, and County Executive Jessica Fitzwater publicly agreed. Local Republican leaders also condemned the vandalism and called for a full investigation and security review.
Thank you, AJ, for that story from the morning show this morning. Again, people are vandalizing signs. How stupid is that? Just go do your job the right way. There's no need for that. And by the way, one of the candidates whose sign was damaged, Diane Fouché, will be on the show joining me on John's House on Friday morning at 10:30. So we're excited to have her on the show. She's running for county executive against William J. Holtzinger, who an invitation has also been sent out to him. We have not heard back from his office as of yet. We've sent out requests to a number of people, and we were having a guest on the show today, but she will be joining us tomorrow. Unfortunately, she got tied up in Frostburg and running for Congress. We will have more details on that coming your way tomorrow morning on John's House, as that, rather than being a virtual visit, it'll be a live in studio visit. So we're pretty excited about the number of guests that we're starting to get here on John's House, despite only being on the air for a week and a half now, which is another fun thing. We're going to talk about the Maryland governor's race today. A new poll came out from Annapolis-based Gonzalez Research. And this is more about, well, as much, I should say, maybe not more, but is as much about Wes Moore and his governorship over the last 4 years since he took over for Larry Hogan. Well, first off, let's talk about what the governor and the lieutenant governor will get should they be elected into office. It's a 4-year term, $195,000 for the governor, $175,000 a year for the lieutenant governor. I'm surprised it's only a $20,000 a year difference between the governor and the lieutenant governor. I'm thinking the governor would be doing a lot more in his or her office than the lieutenant governor, but it's only a $20,000 spread between those offices. We're going to break down what we know so far polling wise. Now, again, we're coming up on a primary, and there are only 2 Democrats running. Wes Moore and Aruna Miller is his lieutenant governor, and Eric Felber and Latrice Hawkins Lights is his lieutenant governor candidate. So again, Wes Moore is the incumbent, has a major advantage, has a lot more money in the bank, and maybe more supporters and followers. However, when we break down this poll, you're going to find out that he is losing ground on the Republican candidates. You wouldn't think that would be the case in Maryland, because Maryland is 2-1 Democrat. And it has been, I think it was 3-1 when I was in high school, way back in the day, when I actually got to be in a mock election at my high school. And I played Ronald Reagan in the mock election. And a good friend of mine named Monty was Jimmy Carter. Now, in that particular school, which was in Southern Maryland, Chopticon High School, give them a shout out, in St. Mary's County, Maryland. That was the first high school I went to. Ended up coming up the road and graduating in PG County. But at Chaptagon High School, more of a farmland. Jimmy Carter won the in-school election. And, of course, Ronald Reagan won the national election that year. And we talked about that a little bit earlier. But Maryland at that time was probably 3-1, 3.5-1 Democrats over Republicans. So, with all the government jobs and defense contractors and things like that moving into the state of Maryland, that bridge has been narrowed. And it's about 2-1 still in favor of the Democrat Party when it comes to the state of Maryland. But Westmore has a substantial lead in the polls over Eric Felber. It's 90+% to less than 10% in that case. Now, there are a number of Republicans running. Carl Bruner Jr. and Kevin Rhodes as I'll read them off as governor and lieutenant governor candidates. L.D. Birkendine and Jeremy Shiflett. Dan Cox, who we've reached out to his candidacy a number of times to try to get him on the show because we understand he's a Frederick County local. And Ron Kropp as the lieutenant governor. Ed Hale and Tyrone Keys. Douglas Lacombe and Martina Duncan. John Myrick and Brenda Thame. Michael Oakes and Ronald Arend. Nancy Jane Taylor and Rachel Hannah Smith. That's the Old Ladies Party. And Shannon Wright and Reba Hawkins from Baltimore. All of them are on the Republican ticket. So when you go to vote, you have a lot of choices if you're a Republican for governor. Dan Cox has run for governor before in the main election and did not get the victory. As a matter of fact, in the last election, he ran for office against Wes Moore. So when Wes Moore came into office, his polling numbers were through the roof at the time. Now, Larry Hogan, I think, was the most Reagan-esque governor we've had in a long time. And I only see one, I wouldn't say minor, but one mistake that he made in his time in office. There were some things that were brought up after the fact about, how Maryland got supplies for COVID because his wife had connections with the China and Korean governments and things like that came out. But I don't think those are things that hurt the state of Maryland. But as quickly as he chose, without doing all the research, which we've now learned is very different over the COVID situation, that would be the only negative because a lot of businesses in the state of Maryland were drastically hurt over the way things were handled in COVID. Now, some businesses found ways around it and got stronger after the fact, especially a lot of the restaurants around the region, outdoor dining and more deliveries and things like that. It ended up being stronger in the state of Maryland. But overall, Larry Hogan was, I think, a pretty good governor for the state of Maryland. And he was on some national committees. He did stand up to Donald Trump a number of times. He was the first one to say, wear the damn mask. I don't know if you ever, I think there were T-shirts and stuff made of wear the damn mask. He was the guy that said that. He's also one of the first Republican governors to ever stand up to Donald Trump. And basically his comments about Trump were, you have the potential to do a good job, but shut your mouth when it comes to social media. Don't say anything in social media is pretty much what Larry Hogan said. I think, members of the far right part of the party turned their back on Hogan after the fact. I think, honestly, if Larry Hogan were to decide to run for president, it wouldn't be a bad choice. But he has stated that he is not going to run for public office anymore. He's enjoying his life away from politics. But as a moderate Republican, Larry Hogan, I'm not saying he's the choice, but he certainly wouldn't be a bad choice to run in the Republican Party for president, especially if they're going to coronate people in the Democratic Party the way they did with Joe Biden. And by the way, speaking of the whole Joe Biden situation, which we've talked about a couple of times on the show, how much that was a bad idea for the Democratic Party. Hillary Clinton, Hillary Clinton, the goddess of the Democratic Party, if you will. Hillary Clinton came out the other day and said she admitted, which she has a tendency to do 10 years too late, or 5 years too late about things. She admitted that it was a humongous mistake for the Democratic Party not to let everything play out in the primaries, and that picking Joe Biden to run for president was a destructive mistake for the Democratic Party. She said it out loud just a couple of days ago. You can look it up. But yeah, Hillary Clinton admitting that was a huge mistake. She should have admitted that her running for office against Donald Trump was a huge mistake too. But, that she should have allowed the rest of the Democrats to have their shot. Even Bernie Sanders had a better shot against Donald Trump. And Bernie Sanders is so far left, to me, it's crazy. But at least he's a respectable guy. At least you can't talk about all of the scandals since, Arkansas that the Clintons are tied to. But that's another story for another day on John's House. Let's dig into the governor's race here in the state of Maryland. So Annapolis-based Gonzalez Research, I'm reading from my notes, so that's why my eyes are not looking directly at the camera, says that Wes Moore, if the election was held today, Wes Moore would get 49% of the vote over any other parties. Now, remembering Democrats are 2-1, a 2-1 margin over Republicans in the state of Maryland. 76% of Democrats would vote for Wes Moore. And there are more Democrats in the state of Maryland. So just that gives Wes Moore a potential win. 81% of Republicans, which are growing in the state of Maryland, would vote if they're going to go out to the polls. And the same for Democrats. If they're going to go out to the polls, they would vote for whoever the Republican candidate is over Wes Moore. Unaffiliated voters, 35% would vote for Wes Moore right now, and 32% would vote for any Republican candidate. So, and then the rest goes down to independent candidates. Now, the discontent with Wes Moore, think about this. We talked about Larry Hogan's time as governor and overall being a balanced budget type of Republican, a Reagan Republican. And guess what? There was a rainy day fund. There was money left over. We had a surplus in the state of Maryland when Larry Hogan left office. Do the math and face reality, Democrats. That's the truth, period. We had a surplus in the state of Maryland and a rainy day fund just in case. And this, again, was after COVID. It was after COVID. So the economy had a chance to come back. But then again, we had Joe Biden as president. That's another story. And then Wes Moore as governor. Now, whether the guy's a nice guy, whether he's, I always say our current president isn't presidential. Wes Moore as a leader, I have no issues with that. As a person, as a guy who, isn't pointing at reporters and saying you're stupid. Okay, I'll give him that. He's respectable. But when it comes down to issues of the budget, that's what voters are most worried about. The discontent in this poll comes over pocketbook issues, affordability, economy, and taxes. Okay, it really comes down to that for Marylanders. If you think about it, that's the way it is. So over 60% of the voters say we pay too much in taxes. It's more like 64%, but 60%, it's over 60% of voters say we pay too much money in the state of Maryland in taxes. Duh. Yes, we do. There's no question about that. If you compare Maryland to just about any state, you lose more of your money out of your pocketbook from taxes. And that's property taxes, that's gas taxes, that's all, the rain tax that came into play before Hogan came into office in the previous administration. I mean, there are so many taxes in the state of Maryland, it's insane. Okay. And property taxes are some of the highest in the nation. Now, I've been lucky enough to work in some states that have no state tax. And I tell you what, I love Maryland. This is my home. This is where I was born and raised. But it makes you think, states like Delaware, New Jersey, Texas, Tennessee, they all don't have a state tax. And things, for the most part, do pretty well in those states. Now, 41%, probably all Democrats, probably all rich Democrats, all say that we pay the right amount in taxes. Now, 1%, I don't know where these people are coming from, say we should pay more in taxes. I don't know who those idiots are. Sorry, but as a lot of my friends, a lot of my Spanish friends in New Jersey say, idiot. That 1% saying, hey, we should pay more taxes. Come on, man. Let's balance the budget. Let's get it right first. And then we can have that discussion because we're nowhere near that. And voting, I've talked about this many times, is very important. Extremely important to do your civic duty because in Maryland, despite the 2-1 advantage for the Democrats, and earlier when some of these elections were 3-1 Democrats, Ellen Saubry ran as a Republican. She's from Montgomery County, if I remember correctly, in 1994. Yes, my history goes back that far in politics. Ran for governor against Paris Glendenning from Prince George's County, and she only lost by 6,000 votes in the state of Maryland. And a Republican had never been governor at that time. So, you could see the progress was being made at that time. Robert Ehrlich in 2002 became the first Republican to ever be governor of the state of Maryland. I bet you didn't know that. Robert Ehrlich was the first governor of the state of Maryland. And then Larry Hogan had 2 terms starting in 2014. So if you don't think, especially if you're a Republican, if you don't think getting out and doing that civic duty is important, you are wrong. You've got to get out there and vote. So start by picking the right candidate to run against Wes Moore if you don't want your taxes to continue to rise. Now, I'm not saying that every single Republican on the ticket or on the ballot are going to lower your taxes. I guess it depends on what the state needs. Gas prices are coming down. So the state's going to make less money if you think about that. Well, no, they won't because the amount you pay in taxes on gasoline is still insanely high. So that's going to stay the same because people will buy more gas because the price will be lower. But it's crazy the amount we pay in taxes in the state of Maryland. So if you are a Republican voter and you're looking at the ballot, do your homework and vote your conscience. That's how everybody should vote. All of this, I'm voting against so-and-so. No, if you don't have a reason to vote for that person, all the Biden people who said, I'm voting against Donald Trump. Back in the day, I'm sure there were people that were Jimmy Carter people who said, I'm voting against Ronald Reagan because he was an actor or whatever reason they had. Don't vote against someone. Do your homework. Find out what the strengths of that candidate are based on what your personal beliefs are, and then make your vote. And the fact that social media is so involved, and yes, we use social media on the show. I'm not saying social media is bad, but if it's the only thing that you use, to make your decisions on who you're going to vote for, 30-second clips that talk about one issue and one issue alone, I'm seeing that a lot on the television commercials and the social media ads, picking one issue. And that's the only issue that anybody wants to talk about as the only reason to vote against that person. Well, there are tens or hundreds of issues that face the state of Maryland, that face the federal government, that face the president of the United States of America, whatever it is you're voting for at whatever time you're actually voting. So don't pick one issue only. Now, maybe that's the most important issue to you. Maybe that carries more weight. I understand. I get it. But if that's the only issue that you agree with somebody on and you disagree with the rest of their issues, or you don't know if they're competent to do the job or not, last two elections, think about it. Do your homework, read about the candidates. Don't just look on social media and vote your conscience. All right, I'm going to wrap this portion up and then we're going to have a little fun in just a couple minutes. Again, Larry Hogan had 2 terms starting in 2014. Now, Governor Wes Moore, in this polling data, it is now showing that he has lost 19.5 points in his approval rating in just the last 12 months. So despite the fact that there's a Republican president that Democrats despise, And Republicans, yes or no, both sides of the aisle. But Democrats line up against the current president. So you have a Republican president, but the Democrat governor of Maryland has lost 19 points in his approval rating in the last 12 months. Another reason to get out if you don't want this guy in office. If you do, still go out and vote. Do your civic duty. But if you want to see change only comes when you get out and vote. And again, I say this for the umpteenth time. Is that really a word? People have been using it for years. If you're an independent and you claim to be independent, if you've registered independent, vote that way. Show the pollers, show the government that change is coming in the United States. All right? All right. Basically, oh, by the way, tax is the main issue. Republicans, if for all the people who said in the poll, taxes are the main issue, Republicans win 47% of the time against Wes Moore. And only 34% vote for Wes Moore if taxes are the main issue. All right, we're going to have fun with bacon. Now, that could mean a lot of things. No, it's not a cooking show, though. All right, fun with bacon. That's coming up in just a couple of minutes right here on John's House.
Sponsored by Fusion Car Wash. Now with 2 locations in Frederick to serve you. One on Spectrum Drive near the FSK Mall, which is a full-service location. And TJ Drive with self-serve vacuums. Download the free Fusion Car Wash app and sign up for a monthly membership. And you can keep all your cars clean daily. FusionCarWash.com.
Sponsored by Intense Barbecue. Family-owned barbecue food truck and catering company cooking in small batches to ensure that the food is the freshest it can be. Intense Barbecue can cater your events and they do any kind of food. It doesn't have to be barbecue. Find them at sebbq.com and satisfy your meat tooth.
Hey, I love it when he ends with that because of 2 things. One is we get close to lunch, it makes me hungry. And, what I'm going into it becomes even more perfect. Satisfy your meat tooth. Now, we're going to have fun with bacon. And the ad just said, satisfy your meat tooth. I actually have somebody who's disagreeing, at least for the day, who has a famous name that has to do with meat. It is Kevin Bacon. So we're going to have fun with Kevin Bacon here on the second half of the show. We had to adjust, which happens anytime you're doing live radio, live television. Things happen the last minute that make you adjust your plan for whatever your show is. That happened this morning. We had to push a political candidate back to tomorrow. She'll be on the show tomorrow. We'll have some fun with that and serious discussion as well. But to kind of fill that time and have fun and make it a good show at the same time, sometimes I have to pull a rabbit out of my hat, as they used to say, or, hey, Rocky, watch me while you're probably too young to remember that cartoon. But I saw something this morning, and literally it's only been out for about an hour and a half maybe. I saw something this morning involving one of my favorite actors that popped up on my Instagram as I was searching for content. And, we talked about having fun with bacon. Brand spanking new on the Kevin Bacon and Humane World for Animals Instagram site. Let's have some fun with Kevin Bacon.
You know me as Kevin Bacon, but on Wednesdays, I'm Kevin Bean. Because Wednesday is Beans Day, the day we swap meat for beans. They're packed with protein and fiber. They keep you full longer. You save money and animals. They're just beans till you realize how many animals they spare. Observing Beans Day is a small step. It makes a big difference. Take it from me, Kevin Bean.
What? Kevin Bean? No, he's Kevin Bacon. Kevin Bacon always, Kevin Bacon's made a lot of movies through the years. And I've kind of grown up with Kevin Bacon. You know, a lot of people, their favorite movie stars are people that were right around the same age as them, that they grew up watching. Kevin Bacon got his start back in the day with National Lampoon's Animal House. So if you've first off, have you never seen Animal House? Maybe you like the Lampoon movies, maybe not. They're not around as much anymore because there's so many other parodies out there. But he started off as a cadet, I guess, in National Lampoon's Animal House. And I still use a saying that comes from that movie, that comes from Kevin Bacon. When, you know, I get something that I want, sometimes I'll say, "Thank you, sir. May I have another?" And I'm not talking about getting smacked like Kevin Bacon was when, you know, he was trying to be a recruit for the Lambda Chais or whatever it was in Animal House. I don't think it was that one. I think that was a Revenge of the Nerds clip. But anyways, Footloose, Flatliners, that's also one of my favorites. The original Flatliners, by the way, the second Flatliners sucked. But the original Flatliners with Julia Roberts, and I mean, there were a ton of stars. Kiefer Sutherland was in there. It was a pretty cool movie, the original Flatliners. If you haven't seen that one and you're a fan of Kevin Bacon or any of the people that I named, I highly recommend. It's a little scary, but it's not gory scary. Flatliners. Diner, filmed in Baltimore. You know, he was in that. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, JFK, A Few Good Men, My Dog Skip, Apollo 13, Sleepers, Wild Things, Hollow Man, Mystic River, Frost Nixon, The Best That You Can. By the way, a newer movie, if you have it half an hour and you want to just have a fun movie, and maybe you watch it with your partner, spouse, friends, whatever, I'm going to recommend to you a movie called The Best That You Can, and it's on Netflix. I think it just came out last year, the end of last year. If you haven't seen it, he's in the movie with his wife, Kyra Sedgwick, which, by the way, for Hollywood marriages, those guys have been married forever. And you still see him making videos all the time about how happy they are and dancing around the house and having a good time. And then Kevin Bacon also has his band, which you haven't seen. Maybe I'll wear the Kevin Bacon hat in the evening show today. I have seen the Bacon Brothers twice, and they are just a fun band. Kevin Bacon's brother is a teacher at NYU, is a music teacher at NYU. And Kevin Bacon, his brother's name is Michael, and Kevin Bacon actually plays guitar pretty well. And he's a decent singer, a lot better than you expect. A lot of these guys that have bands, you know, Billy Bob Thornton has a band that's touring. They're going to be in DC this summer. The Boxmasters, I've heard they're pretty good. I've seen some clips, mostly 60s music. Again, there's a ton of actors that have bands out there. But Kevin Bacon's band is a good fun time, and they usually will play a smaller club like, live in Annapolis. They'll play some places like that. Well, yeah, so go check them out. That's what I'm trying to say. Go check out Kevin Bacon's Brothers Band. But Kevin Bacon has done a lot of fun stuff as well. And I had an intern back in my first internet station that I built way back in like 2008, 2009. A kid was an intern of mine, Dan the Man. And he ended up going to Hofstra University. And at Hofstra, they were tied to a group called Mashable. And they put this bit together. Kevin Bacon was nice enough to join them and have a good time. So if you're a millennial and you don't know anything about when I grew up in the 80s, Kevin Bacon explains it to you.
Oh, hi. I'm two-time Saturn Award nominee Kevin Bacon, and I would like to talk to you about 80s awareness. Awareness of 80s culture and technology has been in a significant decline, especially amongst a certain demographic. I'm talking to you, millennials. All you guys born after 1985 have no idea how hard life was. If I was too shy to ask a girl out, there was no OK Twinder. I went to the white pages, Google it, and called her house. And then you had to make small talk with her mom for like 20 minutes before Alicia even came to the phone. And let me tell you, when she turns down your invitation to Sparrows, you can't just swipe away the hurt. You want to know my favorite app? Rubik's Cube. I saw you tweet an article about Russia. You think Russia's a threat now? Let me tell you about a little thing called the Cold War. They had nukes pointed at us for 20 years. You couldn't even skateboard to a Blockbuster without getting nuked. My friend Tommy went out to rent a copy of Gremlins and never came back. You know why? Nuked. At least that's what my parents told me. Hey, I'm trying to make a point here. What, you guys can't pay attention for more than 2 minutes? Oh, get it, I've had it. Somebody take this mic, please. You people will never know the comfort of parachute pants.
Again, hats off to Dan the Man Johnson, who was an intern of mine a few years ago, at least 10 years ago. No, I guess that's more like 15 years ago. Went to Hofstra, and the crew at Hofstra and the Mashable group put that together back in the day. But yeah, millennials, and I'm not picking on Dougie because he's young, but the first day I decided to do an album break here on the show, and I said album, and he said, what? I said album, vinyl. He's like, what? So anyways, smart kid, but he wasn't brought up. How would he know? How would he know what a vinyl album is? Again, that's all the difference between the 80s and millennials now. Using a phone that's not, that's attached to something versus cell phones. I mean, there were so many differences. Dial-up internet versus what we have now. It was a different time, for sure. And you know what? We all lived through it. We all went outside. We all drank out of the hose. We all rode our bikes all day. Our parents didn't know where we were half the time, but they knew when it was dinner time that we were going to show up and be at home on time. Because if we didn't, there might be no dinner for us, or it might be cold, or it could be worse, depending on whose family you were in. But we didn't worry about that stuff. Kids went to the grocery store when they were like 8 years old and bought stuff for their parents. Now, kids are afraid to drive. They're like, older, and they don't want to get their driver's license yet. Things are very different than when we were coming up. And I'm not going to say everything was bad now or everything was bad then. It's just different. All right, so we're having fun with Kevin Bacon. Now, Kevin Bacon now has a charity website, and you've heard about this for many years. People have talked about the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, which means, how does one actor, any actor you could name, how does one actor connect to Kevin Bacon through movies and things that they've done on screen? So without further ado, I'm going to let you see Kevin Bacon speaking to Kevin Bacon about the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
No. No. Are you kidding me? Who agreed to this? It's commonly understood that any actor or actress in Hollywood can be linked back to me, Hollywood legend Kevin Bacon, in 6 steps or less. But is it true? Let's test that theory. Let's start with an oldie but a goodie, Mr. Marlon Brando. Brando was in The Godfather with Diane Keaton. Diane Keaton was in Annie Hall with Christopher Walken. Christopher Walken was in Catch Me If You Can with Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks was in Apollo 13 with Hollywood legend Kevin Bacon. Okay, here's a tougher one. Mr. Buster Keaton. Buster Keaton, okay. Buster Keaton was in Sunset Boulevard with William Holden, who was in Network with Faye Dunaway, who was in Little Big Man with Dustin Hoffman, who was in Rain Man with Tom Cruise, who was in A Few Good Men with me. That's impressive. Either that or you're cheating using Google's dangerously addictive search tool called the Bacon number. So here's another one. Kevin Hart. Kevin Hart and Steve Carell were in The 40-Year-Old Virgin, and Steve Carell was in Crazy Stupid Love with me. I mean, not actually in the movie. I mean, we weren't actually in love. Although I do find him unorthodoxly attractive. Doesn't really do it for me. How about Vin Diesel? Damn, you got me. Easy. Stu Moons. Vin Diesel was in Awakenings with Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro was in Sleepers with you. Okay. The last one. Miss Piggy. Miss Piggy. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Bacon. Miss Piggy. I see what you did there. But guess what? I know this one. Miss Piggy was in the Muppet movie with Kermit the Frog. Kermit the Frog was in Frog Prince with Frank Oz. Frank Oz was in Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones with Rose Byrne. Rose Byrne was lucky enough to be in X-Men First Class with Hollywood royalty, Kevin Bacon.
There you have it. And that is for charity, by the way. There is a new website you can check out if you want to find out who, if you want to name any famous person and see what their 6 degrees or less to Kevin Bacon is, go to 6degrees.org and you will get that information. 6degrees.org, and you can help a charity at the same time. So a little fun with Bacon to round out the show today. Again, I want to take a moment to thank everybody involved behind the scenes in making this happen. We had AJ on the show a little bit, giving us some news about the political process at the beginning of the show, talking about how crazy it is that people are destroying. This is the 2020s. People are still out destroying people's property and their signage that they want to put in their front yard or wherever. Come on, give me a break. Check out Good Morning Frederick to get updated each and every morning before John's House, which, by the way, will be moving from 10:30 to 10 o'clock right after Good Morning Frederick. That's going to start next Monday here on the Everything Frederick Live podcast network. I appreciate you joining me once again. Tomorrow, we will have actually, for the next 3 or 4 days, special guests on both shows. I will be back this afternoon at 4 o'clock to talk Frederick sports, and then we're going to go catch a doubleheader with the Frederick Keys just down the road. So this is all Frederick all the time. Well, everything that affects people in Frederick, or people in Frederick hopefully will like and have some fun with, like having fun with bacon. Always fun with bacon. Isn't it always taste better? I don't know. You have to ask his wife. Anyways, I'm going to end with that before I get myself into more trouble. And don't forget, again, tomorrow morning, Good Morning Frederick at 9 a.m. Lots of different podcasts you can check out and find them all on the Everything Frederick Live podcast network. My name is John Hunt, and you've been checking out John's House.
Thanks for stopping by John's House. Make sure you share, like, and comment, because this conversation is better when Frederick is part of it. Tune in every weekday for more local stories, real issues, community voices, and the people helping shape Frederick. We'll see you next time.
This episode is a proud production of the Everything Frederick Live podcast network. Your home for Frederick's best podcasts, streaming daily on YouTube.